The school shootings in Newtown, Connecticut already had America and New Mexico talking about gun control. And so the opening week of the session saw 3 bills introduced dealing with gun control. Then the horrific news of the South Valley shootings brought the issue home. We start our in-depth look this week with NMIF producer Matt Grubbs, speaking to those who filed the bills that will be the centerpiece of this dialogue.
Your bill to close the personal transfer, it's sometimes referred to as a loophole or a gun show loophole. Explain it to me.
It's a private loophole. Closing the private loophole not only at gun shows, but also on a individual private sale in the confines of your kitchen table, whatever. So that's the bill basically is a background check piece of legislation. It's tailored after the Brady bill that's already existing in background checks at established gun dealers. We want to make sure that individuals who should not be in possession of a weapon now, because of the background check, will have a very difficult time of purchasing assault weapons, handguns, etc.
It's a situation where if I had a felony, I could either go to you at a gun show, and if you're not a dealer, if you're just someone who's there, I could talk you up, see what you have, and I could buy that.
That's what can exist right now.
I wouldn't have to show you my driver's license?
In some gun shows, there is no ID check whatsoever. Right now, the way the law sits in the state of New Mexico, a person that's been adjudicated mentally by a court of law, by a judge, adjudicated mentally incompetent, who has also been confined to a mental institution, a convicted felon, a criminal, a fugitive of the law, can walk into any gun show, walk into a person's house and exchange money for a weapon, no questions asked. It's basically holding our gun owners to a higher level of responsibility and holding our law-abiding individuals who own weapons that wish to sell them also to a higher standard, but one that ensures safer communities, safer neighborhoods, safer work sites.
We've spoken to a couple of Republicans, Representatives Cook and Representative Espinoza, and they say that for an individual to do a background check is just too much to ask of them, that they're not going to be able to either pay for that or know how to do it.
The background check will be initiated by the Department of Public Safety. It's an instant check. They will set up a hotline number, and in a matter of minutes, within a time frame of 8 in the morning to 10 in the evening, this hotline number will be in operation. And once the seller at a gun show who is selling one of his weapons under our law calls that hotline number, and in a matter of minutes gets a return call from the DPS whether this individual that's purchasing the weapon is not one of these categorical items under our legislation in terms of prohibited categories. So it's a background check that's automatic. It's not where you're going to wait a half a day, where you're going to wait a week, where you're going to wait a month, where you're going to wait half a year. No, it's an instant background check. And that's, I think, the uniqueness of this piece of legislation. This debate on the background check is very relevant, and I feel is one of the more doable pieces of legislation that could possibly make it through both chambers and hopefully signed by the governor. We know that the governor has taken a position that she definitely does not want to see the mentally incompetent in possession of weapons. And my bill that's a component part of my piece of legislation.
First of all, we started to see on the national level, some executive orders going through with our president, and in reference to our Second Amendment. You already were hearing that it was going into that direction, that there were going to be some executive orders. And to me, it is very, very, very important that we respect our Constitution. If the federal government chooses not to abide or not to respect our Second Amendment rights, then we, as the citizens of this great state of New Mexico, should be able to protect our Second Amendment rights and not abide by the federal government if the federal government is not abiding by law.
Is there anything on the books right now federally that you feel is too onerous to gun owners, that asks too much of them?
No, I think, the law's on the books right now with gun owners. I mean, if you see, these are citizens, law-abiding citizens that have abided by the law. You have not seen them in criminal cases, the law-abiding citizens. What we're seeing, I think what is happening is that we're taking these tragedies, and it's terrible, but we're not addressing the issues. The issues here is if it's the mentally ill, is it those that are on drugs? Is it, the trafficking of gun weaponry that these criminals get a hold of? We need to focus on that so that we can stop this.
Do you anticipate either introducing any measures yourself, or do you know of anyone on the Republican side who's working on that right now?
Not right now, I don't know, but I know there will be, and I know that our governor has stated very, very clearly that she does want to address that issue. And I think it's going to be very bipartisan, that we're someone that says they're not going to support that. I mean, I don't think so, because it's something that is needed, that does need to look into, and our governor has taken the lead on that, which is, commendable.
How does the mental health part rub you when there's someone saying to you as a parent, or to, theoretically you as a parent, hey, we're concerned about your son, we're concerned about your daughter, we saw something like that. Would you welcome that? Would you say, I think I know my son or daughter pretty well?
I think it's very hard for a parent to hear a negative thing about their children. And if there really is a sign, let's say if they're in school or anything, get a counselor or something to try to help that parent through that transition to be able to see that there is a problem with their child. Because sometimes that's what the parent needs, is someone to walk them through that transition to be able to see this behavior, or to see why they're questioning it.
Do you anticipate perhaps legal problems if it were to pass? Some real constitutional challenges?
Well, what's funny is when you care about something like this Second Amendment bill, and you push it through, yet the ones that oppose it are the ones that supported driver's license. And it's on the federal level. You cannot issue driver's license to illegal on the federal level. Marijuana, it's against federal law. Did we not pass it? We passed it. So when things are convenient, it's okay, and it's not against federal law, or they excuse that, yes, it is against federal law, but somehow you manipulate it so it doesn't look like it's against federal law. I think we need to more and more, as citizens of this great nation and our state, we need to stop making our political party our God and stand up and do what is right. And we all know, if we really thought, we all know that we must protect our Second Amendment rights, that it is our right to be able to defend ourselves. And it is not a political issue. And if the federal government abides and respects the Constitution and the Second Amendment, then this is not even going to be an issue.
I filed House Bill 137 because I have a number of constituents who hold concealed carry permits. And as the law is today, they can't go into a restaurant that serves liquor. They can go where there's beer and wine, but they can't go where there's a full liquor license.
Now, from a public safety standpoint, you have to weigh that against someone getting drunk and having a concealed handgun on them.
And it's my feeling that concealed carry permit holders know the law and they're responsible gun owners. I don't believe that mixing alcohol and guns falls into the definition of responsible gun ownership. I am unaware of any instance where a concealed carry licensed permit holder has gone to a bar and gotten drunk. It's a 4th degree felony if they do that currently. It will remain a 4th degree felony if they illegally carry in a bar, which basically means if they're drinking. not anybody can just go and apply for a concealed carry permit. And you can't carry concealed without the permit. So there are restrictions and safeguards.
Sure. Are we having the right kind of gun rights discussion right now in the wake of things like Newtown and in particular what happened in the South Valley in Albuquerque? Are we right to include those things in a discussion of gun rights?
I think we're right to include whatever the people want to include, and those are tragic, horrible cases that if people feel like they need to talk about it, then let's talk about it all. But I don't think that emotion should should be the determining factor in these decisions. I think that we need to take into consideration that there are major mental health issues in the United States, and there are a lot of angry people that twist off and do this, and I don't know how to solve that. But I think it's important to continue to protect our Constitution in spite of the fact that they're really horrible people.
Sure. Do you anticipate seeing any sort of mental health legislation coming down the line from at least this side of the aisle?
I haven't heard of any.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not planning on any. As I said, mental health is a subject that is very complicated, and I don't have the expertise to carry such legislation.
Sure, sure. It's also expensive, mental health, whether it's treatment centers, and it's one of those things that it's so hard to see the results. I mean, it's hard to measure what doesn't happen, kind of a thing. Is that what's standing in the way of it? The measurement? Is it the money?
I think money is a big deal. Yeah. I don't know the specifics, but I carried a mental health bill 2 years ago that just to try and increase the availability of mental health services. So, and I learned during that process that money is a big part of mental health, but it's something we need to consider, sure. Not just for defense of the Second Amendment or this conversation about guns and gun rights. It affects us in our society in a lot of ways.
Representative, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.